All right, well, I'm going to welcome everybody because we got a lot of people coming on in here from all over. Welcome to all the people that are here now. I appreciate you. Amy Roberts, if you could speak up and say hello.
Hello, hello.
Welcome. Amy Roberts and Eve Hill.
Hi.
Say hi. The three of us, actually, we love that you guys are here to join us. We're aging in place specialists, and the education part of aging in place and bringing all aspects of aging is so important to all of us. And I'm big on statistics, and every time that we open one of these meetings, I always kind of throw out statistics, and one of the statistics is our nation's housing infrastructure. We know it's just not easy to age in place, and then to throw on, it's been a family home for so long, and you've got so many different things that go into that. We get Toni because you have to figure that stuff out. It's 50 years or 60 or 70 years of investments or what have you in a family, or something may happen, and you need to know the law, or you need to know where to go, or you need to know how to mediate. And there's big differences between, I believe, law and something else, but and mediation. And I am gonna let Amy Roberts introduce Toni and welcome everybody. And here we go.
Yay! Thank y'all so much for coming. So I met Toni a while back, I guess in 2021, when I started figuring out the senior area, and she really made me feel comfortable and like I belonged here. And so I really appreciate her for that. But she has a bachelor's degree in business administration from Wayland Baptist University, and an associate's degree in paralegal studies from the University of Alaska Southeast. In 2008, Toni moved her aging father with her to San Antonio. Toni's experience as a caregiver really lends itself to her job because she understands firsthand what many of our clients are going through. She worked in the title insurance industry for nearly 30 years and as a paralegal for nearly that long. In 2019, she decided to get her certification in mediation, as she has seen the devastation that illness and death wreaks on many families. Toni enjoys providing mediation services. I'm for meditation too, right? For families involved in conflicts, as she neutrally listens to both sides and helps them work toward a mutually agreeable solution. She serves on the board as secretary of our First Friday networking group. It's a business of professionals dedicated to senior care. She's also a pastor, a mother, a grandmother, a world traveler, and a fabulous baker. Thank you, Toni, for coming and joining us.
You are very welcome. So yeah, I've lived in a lot of places and because I'm old, I've had a lot of careers in my life, and the thing that I've seen consistently throughout all of my careers is when people begin to age, there is first, in being one of those people, there's this kind of denial thing that happens, like it's not really happening, and your mind says you're able to do all the things that you think you should be doing and have always done, and your body says, yeah, we're not going to go there. So that's a weird thing in your head, and you're trying to get your head to match up with what you really can do. So there's a sense of losing a little bit of independence. I know with my parents, when I had the title company in Juneau, and I co-owned it, and my partner bought another title company in Washington State in the San Juan Islands. If any of you have ever been there or think about going there, go. And so my parents, who had been in Alaska for 30 years, didn't want me to go. And I said, well, jokingly, I said to them, you could always come with me, never thinking they would, because they'd been there 30 years and they were ensconced. And they said, oh, okay. So they did. Yeah, I was like, oh my goodness. And so that began a 14-year journey of finding that balance, to being the parent to my parent without taking away their independence. And it was a difficult balance to find. And I think it's consistently is difficult in all families. And then when their health began to fade, and we realized we needed to place them in some place that was a safer setting than their home, because we lived on an island that did not have a hospital. It had a clinic. And so we needed to get them onto the mainland so they would be closer to the facilities. And making that decision was very difficult. And I have 9 siblings. So, they wanted input, but they didn't want to do a lot with it. They wanted to tell me what to do, but they just did not want to be the ones to have to do it. And I get that, I understood that. At first I didn't. At first I was kind of cranky, but then I began to understand, that this is just how it worked. And so over the course of time, especially in working with Carol, who does elder law, and I'll explain what that is in a moment, I see how families don't navigate these transitions well, unless they are very, very close to each other, and there's a lot of open communication and a lot of conversations. It tends to divide families. These incidences tend to put people on one side or the other. And so when I got here and I ended up working with Carol, what her firm does, and I only work for her part-time because I'm building the mediation practice as well, but what her firm does is we cater the practice towards the elderly. So when we prepare wills or we prepare powers of attorney, we prepare them with the idea that at some point they may need extra help. They may need to get government benefits if they have to be placed, because frankly, I know that we want as much as possible for our family members to age in place. But sometimes it's just not possible. There's just not possible because family members can't take care of them, or maybe their health is compromised. And so when they end up needing to be placed, they need to have special language, and especially in the durable power of attorney, that allows their agent to do things that may need to be done so that they could qualify for benefits if they need to get Medicaid coverage. And so that really is the crux of what we do. Is we plan, most estate planning attorneys plan to leave a legacy for their children. But our firm plans to make sure that the parents have enough money that they can have care for the entirety of their lives. We are not so worried about the children. We want the children to get their own stuff together, right? Because mom and dad need to use that money for their own care because we're living longer. It's not like, go ahead.
It's called the longevity revolution.
Yes.
And MIT, this guy out of MIT is, that's his coined phrase at the longevity revolution. And if you look at statistics, we've outlived being centenarians. So when you look at that, it's kind of interesting.
It is. And,
you're on mute.
That happened. I was talking to a financial planner and she said, your mom and dad saved all their money to give to the kids. And then this generation, my generation, the baby boomers, we saved to spend it. And then the younger kids are not saving at all most of the time, or if they do, they save enough, they work enough to get their goal, and then they go and do whatever it is they're going to do, and then they come back and work some more. So there's not that same level of commitment to a job that my parents had, or even that I had, generally speaking. But the problem is as we live longer, the costs don't go away at 65. You know, they don't. And yippee, you get Medicare, but that doesn't always cover the tremendous amount of need that there is out there, especially if you have someone who has not lived a healthy lifestyle, or is just simply is not a healthy person for whatever reasons, genetics or otherwise. The costs they're exorbitant. I can't even believe how expensive any kind of medical thing is. And so we gear our planning towards the idea that they're going to run out of money at some point. So our goal is to preserve as much as we can for the spouse that isn't sick, so that the one and get the best possible care for the one that is, so that when that one passes away, the community spouse, the spouse that remains, is not destitute, because that's generally what happens, and we see it a lot. Social Security is great, but it doesn't cover all your costs, you know, and not everybody planned for their retirement. You know, that's just not everybody has. So that's what Carol's office, that's what we do in the law firm is like, for instance, with the power of attorneys, we give extra power to the agent. So if they need to gift more than the $15,000 that's allowed per year, then we have that in the power of attorney, so we can get those funds moved so that they can get the amount that's allowed down enough so that they can qualify for benefits. We set up wills if we know that one spouse is going to need to have benefits. We set up the wills so that the other spouse doesn't leave their stuff to the one that's sick, because then that'll boot them off. So we're thinking about that stuff all the time, which is why elder law is a whole different practice in estate planning than a regular estate planning attorney. And then we also do the Medicaid side, where we get people qualified for Medicaid. We create qualified income trusts. If they make too much money in income, if their Social Security and pensions go above the $2,000 mark per month, then we can create a vehicle to put the funds in that won't count against them. So we have all sorts of things that are allowed by law to help people get qualified. If they have too much money, we have we call it a half loaf strategy. And what we take half of the money and gift it to the children. And then the other half, we buy an annuity that covers the penalty period for that gift, because there's a penalty period. And then it acts as Medicaid paying during the time of the penalty until Medicaid kicks in. So, I mean, there's 1,000 things that we do to help people get qualified. Most people will call us and say, I make too much money or I have too much stuff. And that is not prohibitive. We can take care of it almost always. We tend to kind of have a cutoff limit. You know, if you have several $1 million, probably you should pay for your own care. You know, probably we shouldn't be doing strategies to make it qualified for Medicaid, because that's not what it's there for. But most people do not have that kind of money. All right.
What if you have okay.
Go ahead.
I was curious. I mean, I have a friend of mine who was asking, they do have a house, but the husband does have Parkinson's, and she's concerned that all the assets from the house will go for his care, and there'll be nothing left for her kid or for her, you know? So.
Yeah, you know, that's common. The thing that there are so many misconceptions about Medicaid. First, you can have a house and you can have a car, and those don't count against you, and Medicaid will not take them from you. That's not how it works. And if you're married, you have one spouse that's placed and one that is at home, then you're exempt from any kind of claim for Medicaid. They can't come against you and try to get their money back, because Medicaid is not Medicare. Medicaid is a benefit, but they want to be paid back. So if they can, they will, but there's exemptions to coverage. So a community spouse is an exception. So there's no claim if there's a community spouse, no claim if there's a disabled child, no claim if there's a child that over 21 that's been living with the family for more than a year that is not married, right? If it turns out that there isn't a community spouse or there are no exceptions, then we can do things like the ladybird deed, which I'm sure you've all heard of at one point or another, which is a transfer at death deed. So that interest in the property transfers at the moment of death to whoever you've granted it to. And so it comes out of your estate immediately, and it's an asset that Medicaid can attach to.
Wow.
So there's so many things. So when you hear someone say, no, I'll never qualify, not probably true. Almost everybody, we can get qualified. I have done probably 30 applications in 5 years, and I've never had one denied. So, and that's just me, that's just my applications. Jody has done some, and Nina and Michelle have both done some. And so there's a way, it's just, we have to be really proactive and think about, you know, the plan, the estate plan has to give the agent enough power to do what needs to be done. And so we're thinking from the very beginning to the very end, how are we going to help these people if they get into a crisis situation? So that's the first half. So do you have any questions?
That was a great answer to that question.
Okay.
Is there an impact by what state you live in?
Every state has different Medicaid rules. It's a federal program, but it's at the discretion of the state on how they distribute funds. So in Texas, all of those things I just told you are pretty much specific to Texas. In Alaska and Washington, where I used to live, there was no such thing. Well, there was an enhanced life estate deed, the ladybird deed, but they didn't allow them, didn't recognize them. Just like Texas does not recognize quitclaim deeds. If you do a quitclaim deed, it won't count in this state. So don't do those here. But every state has a little bit different, but there are federal mandates, like the qualified income trust. That's a federal mandate. So every state has a variation of the qualified income trust, which happens, which is the vehicle you want to use if you make too much money. If your level is too high for income, then you take that income and you put it in this trust. And the reason why Medicaid doesn't think of it as a resource is because you have no control. So it's your money that I'm putting in this trust, but you can't touch it. All of the money will go to the nursing home. Everything, your income except for $60 goes to the nursing home, even out of the qualified income trust, but it doesn't count as a resource anymore. So it's these little tricks, these little things, these loopholes that Medicaid created intentionally, so that people could qualify. Because what was happening in the beginning when Medicaid first started out is no one qualified because the rules are so heavy. So they created these little loopholes that can be used and still allow people to qualify, because it's the middle income that is mostly affected by not being able to qualify, obviously. You know, the very, very rich don't really need to, and they can afford long-term care insurance, but the middle income can't, and the low income qualify easily. So it's us in the middle that kind of struggle with getting the care that we need as we age out. Okay.
There's a question in the chat. Cindy
Okay.
asking, does it have to be an irrevocable trust to protect?
it has to be a certain kind of irrevocable trust. Not every irrevocable trust will protect it. No, it has to be a qualified income trust specifically. And the reason is because that trust can only take in income, nothing else. It can't have anything else in there. So it's only funded by the income, and income just moves in and out, in and out. So it's, the goal is to keep it as low balance as possible. Okay. All right. Revocable trusts are killers for Medicaid. That they just do not work well for Medicaid. So if you're thinking about doing that, be careful, because it all counts. If you put your house in a revocable trust, it will count as a resource. If you keep it out of the trust, it doesn't.
Rhonda's asking, at what age should people be meeting with someone like yourself?
Well, with my office, you really should start thinking about it probably at 60, 65. We do estate plans for younger people. We're not as, mindful of the language. I mean, we're mindful of language and making sure they get what they want, but we're not paying attention to the idea that maybe they're going to need help. So we suggest between 60 and 65, you want to make sure that you've got a good estate plan that gives enough width to your agent to do what's necessary. Or if someone's been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or things like that, get it done now while there's cognition, so that it can be in place when there isn't. Because once they lose cognition capacity, there's no going back. You can't fix it. Right?
Does anybody else have questions? I think this is amazing. I know Eve had some questions about finding people like yourself in our own communities.
Well, yes, and also, go ahead.
Go ahead. You always want to look under elder law attorneys, and there is a national elder law group. It's called NAELA, NAELA.
Yep.
And you want to go on there because they have been, most of them are certified elder law attorneys, which means they've gone through the hours necessary and done enough estate plannings to be certified, which is no small task. It's hard to get certified.
I'm going to have Eve put it. Oh, she just put it in there. God.
Yeah. I'm trying to keep up with all of you. Yes.
Yeah. You want to get on the website and find NAELA attorneys because they're elder law specific. And then you want to get on their website and say, okay, do they help with Medicaid? Because even some elder law attorneys don't really do Medicaid, so they don't really plan their documents towards that idea. So you want to make sure that they do estate planning and Medicaid, because they need to know both sets of rules, the statute and the federal mandates.
So Toni, tell a little bit about guardianships too. I've heard that they're not all so great. They cost a lot. You've got to report in a lot of things. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, guardianship is the last resort. If you have to try everything else before you get to guardianship. And one is because the courts prefer there be no guardianship, because I don't know that everybody understands that when you become the guardian over somebody, you take away all their rights. They can't vote, they can't drive, they can't choose where they live, they can't marry, they can't legally bind into a contract. It's all gone. That you've taken that away. So they become wards of the court they're kind of like almost a non-person in terms of activity in society.
And you as the family don't have control either, right?
Well, if you're the guardian, then you have complete control with court oversight. And that's where the other half of it. First, getting a guardianship is expensive because you don't just get a guardianship. You have to hire an ad litem who represents the potential ward, which is $500 to $1,000. Then you have to get a medical doctor to certify that this person does not have the capacity to make their own decisions, which runs anywhere between $1,000 and $5,000. Then you have to go through the court process. And once you're named guardian, if you're guardian over person, which is all of their medical decisions, and their estate, which is all of their assets, if you're guardian over both, you have to yearly report. For the person, you have to submit an annual report of condition and well-being. And that tells the court if there's been a change in doctors, if there's been a change in their cognition status, if they've moved, if you've placed them somewhere else. You have to report all that to the court. And then the court makes a court visit to the ward to make sure that they're getting what they need. And then they file their own report. And then you're okay. But you also have to file an accounting if you're a guardian over the estate. And you don't have to be guardian of both. You can be one or the other or both. But you have to file an accounting, and every penny has to be accounted for. There's no error. It has to be at a zero balance. So every penny that you've spent, you have to have a receipt. You have to be able to prove it. And you have to be able to prove that it was entirely for the ward's benefit. And then the court looks at that, and if they don't like it, they will sanction you. They will call you up and say, okay, I'm not sure that this is okay. And what happens sometimes is people upfront some of the costs, and the court will refuse to allow them to be reimbursed. So the court's very actively involved. If the ward has a house, you have to ask the court permission to sell it. You can't just sell it and then put the funds in their account. It doesn't work that way. You have to ask the court permission, then you have to give them the sales agreement. They have to investigate to make sure it's fair market value. Then they'll say, okay, then you can do the sale, and then you have to report that the sale has been completed. So it is, do not do that unless you absolutely have no option, because the only reason you would do it is if you have no power of attorney, no medical or durable power of attorney.
Okay. So now you can,
That's good. That's good information.
now we're moving on to the mediation portion.
The mediation. Go ahead.
Well,
ahead.
quick question. How often do probates come through your office, or do you guys deal in probate as well?
Do we do probate? Yes. Probate is probably 50% of our practice. Yeah, because
That's pretty high. I didn't think it would be that high.
you know, we get people in the nursing home, and then we take care of the issue after. Most of the people that we qualify for Medicaid really truly don't need a full probate. There has to be some action. I mean, if there's a home particularly, there has to be something on the public record that shows that someone's died. But a full probate isn't always necessary. But probably 50% of our practice is probate. Yeah. Us baby boomers were a big bunch.
Oh my God. The statistics are staggering come 2035.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they, you know, even though we're living longer, we're still, everybody has to die. Death and taxes can't avoid them.
Yeah. And the worst part is that our Social Security will run out by the time we're ready to, you know, get it needed. And that's going to be a whole another issue. But
it is.
Let's move on to mediation.
Yes. So
mediate that tax problem.
Yes. So mediation, the way that came about was, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, was we saw families disintegrate when somebody died because they're fighting over the assets of the estate, and they, even if there's a will in place, they want to contest the will, which is not an easy thing to do. It doesn't ever, probably maybe 1/4, not even that, maybe 1/10 of the time are you successful at contesting a will. Most of the time it's just throwing money away. And so it's very difficult to break a will, very, very difficult. But we have people fighting over it. Or I've seen this more often is when mom or dad gets sick, there's always, and there's multiple children, or multiple family members, there's always one that thinks they need to be in charge of everything. And right. And then there's one who probably should be in charge, but won't be because they don't want to fight, or they end up fighting. And so what I do, I don't mediate. I don't do court mandated mediation, because for me, that's just frustrating, because if the court tells them they have to be there, they're already coming with attitude. So it's hard to break the impasse. I mediate exclusively families who are in distress because of something that's happened, some crisis that's happened. For instance, I'm in the middle of a mediation right now. I've got a gentleman who needs to sell his house here that he has had a family member living in rent-free for 9 years, and they don't want to move. And they also don't recognize they've lived free for 9 years. But he needs them to move out because he's got some obligations that he needs to deal with. And so there's a lot of tension, as you can imagine, between the two parties. So I've just come in to mediate a solution, so that everybody can get as much of a win as is possible. The key to mediation is that no one's going to get everything they want. It's just not going to happen. But if they can walk away with as much as they can get, then they're more inclined to keep the agreement. And at the end of the conference, they have to sign a mediated settlement agreement, which is enforceable and binding. So it's a contract that they are required to sign. Do they breach it? Of course they can, and you would have to take them to court to enforce it, but it is enforceable. It's a real contract. And most people, do honor contracts once they've signed them. So that's the kind of thing. I did one a couple of months ago, an elderly woman, just feisty. This woman was just amazing. She accomplished so much in her life, so much. And she's not really that old in the general scheme of things. She's in her mid-70s. And she had a stroke, and she lived on this massive 400-acre ranch, and she had a stroke, and she has been in rehab since. It's been almost 2 years because she can't quite get recovered. And she's out of money, and her sister's kind of been picking up the tab. And they don't want to do that anymore because, $5,000 a month is not chump change. And so we mediated an agreement where she would list the property and get it sold, reimburse her sister, and then she could choose where she wanted to live within the confines of needing care. But it would be her option which place. And so we're still working on the sale part, because 400 acres is not easy to unload, but they signed the agreement, and everybody came to an agreement on that, and it's binding, and so it's for sale. So those are the kinds of things that I work with, is where families just don't know how to come to an agreement, and I sit down and figure out a plausible way. A couple of times I have had the kids, there's always one that needs to be in charge. And so I go to mom and dad, or mom, or whoever is the adult, and say, who do you want? No kids around, because parents will not tell their children no. It's very difficult because they don't want to create problems. So if you had to choose and they don't know that you're choosing, who would you want to be your power of attorney? Who would you want to be your medical power of attorney? Who's good at telling your doctors no? Because that's really, you need an advocate. Medical power of attorney is an advocate to kind of not be bulldozed by the medical system, because it's pretty easy to get bulldozed. And so when I've talked to them, I write down what they want, then go into the room with the kids, get all the kids together, and we talk about what's what's possible. And one of the questions I always ask, if the person that really, really wants to be the durable power of attorney, the first question I say, that's great. When was the last time you reconciled your checkbook? When was the last time you didn't look online to see what your balance is and live off that? When was that last time you did that? Because if you haven't done that, if you're not careful with your own money, you're not going to be careful with mom's, right? So when we ask those hard questions, there tends to be a little quiet in the room, you know, people get real quiet. So then the next question is, who here is really good with money? Who's pretty tight? You know, who's thrifty? Because that really is the one that should be in charge. Because if you're the power of attorney, you are the fiduciary, which is a higher standard than just being, it's not your money. You can't spend it. In the state of Texas, if you're the power of attorney and you're spending the person's money on things for yourself, it's fraud. It's against the law, and you need to be reported, and we are bound to report you. I had a woman, and this was a long three meeting process, but I had a woman whose dad had said, oh yeah, you know, don't worry, I'll pay your rent. And then he died. And then so mom kind of picked up the banner, oh, don't worry, I'll pay your rent. And then she got very sick and she has Alzheimer's. And so this person was continuing to pay the rent with mom's money. And it's like, no, you cannot do that anymore. You need to go get a job because I'm going to report you. So you have to have those conversations. It's against the law. And they need to understand that this is a fiduciary standard. It's not just tossing money out. It's not your money to toss. And you know, I said, you know, your mom is 75 right now. If she lives to be as old as my father did, my dad died when he was 97 and a half. And the money that she has is not going to last because you're spending it. Even if you don't spend it, it's not going to last. But with you spending it, it's definitely not going to last. And not only that, but these gifts to yourself are going to prohibit her from qualifying for any help. So big problem, and you need to get it resolved. So we worked out an agreement and she's paying her mom back. So, you know, but you have to have those hard conversations because this is the reality of the world that we live in. And so that's really where I love the best. That's where I went part-time with Carol, the law firm, the elder law firm, so that I could really concentrate on this, because this is really where my heart is. I hate to see families dissolve because they don't know how to manage. You know, most of it is miscommunication, misinterpretation of information. They just don't understand what they're reading. Everybody goes online and reads all the horror stories about Medicaid, and it's almost all wrong. Or, you know, reads all these horror stories about durable power of attorneys and how they've taken advantage. And so they come in with a mindset that something is wrong, when in fact, most of the time, everything is okay. It's just they haven't had any conversations. So even sometimes some of the settled agreement is that they have a weekly conversation so that they're completely transparent. And oddly enough, those weekly conversations bypass eventually the conversation about, you know, how did I spend mom's money, or they get into where they become back into a relationship with each other, and which is really the goal, to reconnect families. So that, because, you know, when my mom died, and then my father died, and then you're an orphan, you know, and if my siblings and I can't hold on to each other, you know, that's hard. It makes it hard. It's all just more losses that you're having to grieve through. And so if you can hold the family together and grieve together, it's less painful to face a loss when you're all kind of huddled up together.
So do you recommend having like a group, not a group, where everybody can see the books that are, you know, everybody knows what this person is spending for mom and dad or whoever?
Well, yes, and there actually is an accountability. I mean, if you're the power of attorney or the guardian, you have accountability, or the executor of the estate. The beneficiaries have a right to know what you're doing with that money.
Right.
If they are asking for it, you know, you should probably share it. You should be, because you all, the whole idea is to be transparent as possible. They're going to argue about that $8.47 at Whataburger. They're going to, you know, they might argue about that, but you know, you explain that away. But as long as you're transparent, there really isn't anything that they can argue with you about. As long as all that money is being spent on mom, you know, they may decide that, you know, I had a brother call. He was so angry because the DPOA moved mom and dad from independent living to assisted living, which was more expensive because dad was falling and he was a fall risk and he needed more help and he needed more services. And brother called, he was furious because it was more expensive and his inheritance was just, he was just watching it go away. And I said, your inheritance doesn't exist until your parents die. And so you may not have one. It's their money. You know, you just have to be pretty hard. You do have to be hard because people have a whole wrong attitude towards inheritance.
That was a good statement. I like your statement. That was a good statement.
Oh, well,
Agree.
thank you. Thank you. Not everybody likes me in the room, as you can imagine.
Well, I think it's powerful. I think it's very powerful when you say it that way because it's real and raw. But I think the hardest thing is what our future is about to hold in this sector. And so as we're living longer, statistically in the last 10 years, we've doubled the amount of centenarians. And now that by 2035, all the baby boomers will be 65. I can only imagine what that's longevity revolution that I was talking about earlier, how it's going to come into play of 100 plus. With no Social Security, will we have Medicare and Medicaid? I mean,
I think we'll have, I think we'll have Medicare. And again, Medicaid will probably stay in place because it's funded, it's refunded and refunded. Except for, you know, our firm that we try to get out of ever having a claim filed. We try to maneuver.
Will it be depleted? Will it be depleted because of the amount of people that are going to need it after 2035 or, you know, 2060?
You would think so. Okay, so let's just preface it. It's a government-run benefit program. They don't believe in depleting anything. They just make more money, right? So probably Medicaid is fine. Medicare, probably will struggle harder than Medicaid because Medicaid is a government-run, government-funded program. So it's a whole different way the government looks at that program, but Medicare is funded by the people. And so, you know, I've paid into Medicare all of my working life and as have you, most of you. And so that has been funded by the people. So the mindset towards Medicare is completely different because it's not a government benefit that they can give to the people. It was a benefit that we paid into for ourselves. It was like a big, massive savings program for us. And they can't really mess with that, but they can let it deplete. And that will be the way that they would get rid of it. Yeah, but Medicaid, I think, will be forever because that's benevolent society at its best, right? Is the Medicaid program. Yeah.
We're getting to that final time, and for this East Coasters over here where it's getting late, but I'm going to open it up to all of the people that are on the call to be able to talk and ask questions and see what you have. Anybody open up your mic, please? Feel free.
Well, I had mentioned that this is timed very well because I'm meeting with some elder attorneys. I've been referring people to elder attorneys under the guise of you're coming here from a different state, every state's laws are different, and all of these myths that everybody's been telling you may or may not be correct. And so tonight has really opened up way more reasons why one would get involved with an elder attorney. But as far as the mediation factor of that, is that typically housed within an elder attorney firm also?
No, it isn't. In fact, there aren't very many that do my kind of mediation. I've only met one other mediator that does that. No, Carol did not really want the mediation to be part of her practice, which is part of why I went part-time to pursue this. Because although it fits well, she was concerned about, giving an estate plan to a family and then hauling them back in for mediation on that estate plan. So she was concerned about the perception of perhaps conflict. So I stepped away from that part so that I could pursue this part so that there would not be that issue. It's my own business under my own LLC. And so if she refers to me, I don't touch her. I don't do any of her paralegal work anymore. So I don't touch any of the files other than accounting wise. I do all of her accounting. There isn't that concept anymore. It really couldn't be a conflict of interest because I don't have anything to do with her day-to-day files.
And is there,
but if they wanted to use you, she could use you, right?
She could use me now. Yes, she could send people
like
to me
Rhonda
now.
if you needed to, but if Rhonda wanted to use you, you could do that, whatever.
Yes, and actually I work a lot with Lola, which is a loss of life advocate. Esther Pipley, she has this amazing thing that's for people who have lost anything. And she comes in and advocates. And so I do a lot of mediation for her. Yeah, for her firm, her group, yeah. Other questions?
There is a question on the live Facebook feed, but I'm going to let Rhonda, did somebody else have a question before I do the live feed? Okay, so Vince on the live feed is asking about, do you need a transfer of death for a spouse? What it's in reference to.
The transfer of death is a deed. Transfer of death is a deed, as is the Ladybird deed. They kind of do the same thing. At the point of death, the title, the interest in the property immediately moves out of the estate into whoever's name. You don't need to do it if it's community property and if one spouse is still living. So, but if it's just one spouse, then yes, you should have that in place because you really don't want Medicaid to come back and file a claim which will attach to the property. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? Feel free.
I don't have a question, but I'm in Texas and I think Toni is also. How do we get in touch with you and the law firm to help the people here in Texas?
So it's the law office of Carol Birch, like the tree it sounds, but it's not spelled like that. It's BERTCH, BERTSCH. Yeah, so it's Carol Birch. There's a couple in Dallas, a couple of law firms that practice elder law in Dallas, and a couple in Houston, and then New Braunfels has Christine Lesher, who's just amazing. But they all do what we do. So if you just reach out to me, and I'll get you my email address before we close down, I can connect you with someone closer, or we can practice statewide, but it's probably simpler to have someone closer.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Toni, is there like a organization that you belong to that would be a source to find people who do mediation?
Texas Association of Mediators, TAMS, they have a whole list of mediators and where they're located. And then the national, I'll get you the national information because I don't belong to that yet. Because I've really tried to focus just here in Texas. Although with Lola, I'm actually doing mediations all over the country, but I know this is going to sound crazy. I am not a massive Zoom fan when you're doing mediation because so much of what is said is in body language, and no words, but body language speaks volumes. And so it's hard for me to read people when it's a Zoom because they only go this much, right? And I don't know what their hands and their feet are doing. And I need to know that sometimes because it helps me figure out a plan. Okay, so let me get you my information. It's T O'Brien, so it's Toni, TOBRIEN, at assisting seniors with an S, ASSISTING, SENIORS.com. And you can just reach me there and I can hook you up with other elder law attorneys throughout the state. Just tell me where you are and I can tell you who we would recommend, who we would refer you to. And I can get you some information on mediators around the state as well. So just if you have a question, absolutely let me know. I'm happy to help.
We are nationwide on this phone call. So
You
what
are.
do we do about our nationwide people and where do we go for that information?
So for elder law, go to the NAELA website, NAELA. And for the mediators, I will shoot you that information. I will get it to Amy and she can get it onto whomever, to get it onto your website so that you can reach out. Because there's mediators all over the country and we're not bound by state. If we're certified, we're certified. We just need to connect with another mediator in another county or another state and work with them, but we don't have to hand it over to them. So that's the really nice thing about mediation. We're not bound. Any other questions?
I have one that's a kind of a specific question that was asked.
Sure.
If an older adult parent has a CD, the child is the beneficiary. What happens when the parent dies? The child, is it possible not to cash in the CD, but to keep it until it matures? Or do you have to cash it?
You can convert it. Generally speaking, you should be able, you would cash it and convert it into a CD. Yeah, so they're not going to roll it over like an RRA. They're not going to do that when it's spouse to spouse, but they will allow you to cash it and buy another CD without penalty.
Oh, see, but you do have to cash it.
Generally, yeah, because they have to get their name off it. Even if you have a joint bank account, they usually have you close the account and then open one in just your name. It's the same thing. No penalty.
No penalty, but you might not get a better rate.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Toni, thank you so much. I always love these educational masterminds and bringing people in from all over because we always learn these little golden nuggets. And I'm sure that there's many of us on this call will now be calling tomorrow some sort of elder care to attorney to get our affairs in order because we haven't, we don't think about that. And this longevity revolution is, an eye opener. It's something that's important. It really is. And I thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Just pay attention. We are living longer and there's a whole bunch of us going through the system. And it is impacting our infrastructure. It's a big impact, and we need to be mindful of that. Okay.
So yes, thank you. I'm going to let Amy introduce the person who we have next Tuesday, because she is fascinating and a trailblazer in the aging in place. So Amy Roberts, are you there?
I don't know. You can do it so much better than I do, but
she's amazing, this woman. And when she tells you, we are going to put her name on the link, and I suggest that you go Google her. All right, Amy, go.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, her name is Jane Passioni. She is in charge of SALSA, which in San Antonio is Successfully Living and Aging in San Antonio. And so it's about aging in community, not just aging in place.
Nice.
And San Antonio, with the help of John Santikos, who had he was just a big business guy here in town, but he put his money toward, when he passed, toward the San Antonio Area Foundation in aging in place and such. And so we got a nice good bit buff from that. So Jane is in charge of that. She's just got a wealth of knowledge. I call her all the time and say, hey, what about this? I got somebody that lives outside. She's done transit. She's done everything.
Wow.
So much, but she's going to be incredible. She's got a British
She
accent.
also is like an award winner in diversity and inclusion. And so if you just read about her, she really has she's rich in history. She knows, how to get aging in place into your community and get your community to listen up. This woman's amazing. So
Yeah,
I can't wait to share her
Toni,
with
do you know
everybody.
her? Toni, you know her, right?
I know who she is. I haven't ever had like a conversation with her, but I know who she is. Yeah. How can you not? Yeah. She's pretty amazing. And she's very, very sweet. I mean, she's a very humble person.
So nice.
Yeah.
So nice.
But,
Yeah, I love her.
So
if you're wanting to figure out how to do your neighborhood, your community, whatnot, she is a wonderful resource to help you get started and build that up for y'all.
Yeah.
Where you
live.
live.
We'll see you here next Tuesday.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Take care.
And cheers, Rhonda, with your glass of wine. Anybody else want to bring a glass of wine? Enjoy. Have a good day.
Fantastic.
Bye.
Bye.